Today's book is Man Searching for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. So, the classic tribute to hope from the Holocaust. Oh, so let's read. Okay, for the beginning, I think it's gonna be useful to get the brief, summary of this book. So, Man Searching for Meaning by Viktor F. Frankl. Frankl, a psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor, reflects on his experience in Nazi concentration camps and explores the search for meaning in life. The book offers profound insight into human resilience, purpose, and personal growth. Yeah, it is kind, I guess, psychological, motivational, maybe stuff. So let's start to read. So, preface. If it's not boring, let's try to read. So, Dr. Frankl, author psychiatrist, sometimes ask his patients who suffer from a multitude for torments great and small, why do you not commit suicide? From their answer, he can often find the guideline for his psychotherapy. In one life, there's love for one's children to tie to. In another life, a talent to be used. In a third, perhaps only lingering memories worth preserving. To weave these slender threads of broken into a firm pattern of meaning and responsibility is the object and the challenge of logotherapy, which is Dr. Frankl's own version of modern existential analysis. In this book, Dr. Frankl explains the experience which led to his discovery of logotherapy. As a long-time prisoner, he in Bestial concentration camps, he found himself stripped to naked existence. His father, mother, brother, and his wife died in camps or were sent to the gas vents, so that, excepting for his sister, his entire family perished in these camps. How could he every possession lost, every value destroyed, suffering from hunger, cold, and brutality, hourly expecting extermination? How could he find life worth preserving? Yeah, in other words, he had such horrible experience, and he was searching the purpose, meaning of his life, you know, just in order to live and just to make it worth living. A psychiatrist who personally has faced such extremity is a psychiatrist worth listening to. He, if anyone, should be able to view our human condition wisely and with compassion. Dr. Frankl's words have a profoundly honest ring, for they rest on experiences too deep for deception. What he has to say gains in prestige because of his present position on the medical faculty of the University of Wien, and because of the renown of the logotherapy clinics that today springing up in many lands, patterned on his own famous neurological polyclinic in Wien. One can't help but compare Viktor Frankl's approach to to theory and therapy with the work of his predecessor, Sigmund Freud. Both physicians concern themselves primarily with the nature and cure of neurosis. Freud finds the roots of these distressing disorders in the anxiety caused by conflicting and unconscious motives. Frankl distinguishes several forms of neurosis and traces some of them to the feel of the sufferer no found meaning and a sense of responsibility in his existence. Freud stresses frustration in the sexual life, Frankl frustration in the will to meaning. Yeah, as I said before, he was searching the meaning of life because after this experience, you have to have some meaning. You have to find some meaning in life. In Europe today, there's market turning away from Freud and a widespread embracing of existential analysis, which takes several related forms. The school of logotherapy being one. It is characteristic of Frankl's tolerant outlook that he does not repudiate Freud, but builds gladly on his contributions. Nor does he quarrel with other forms of existential therapy, but welcomes kinship with them. The present narrative, brief though it is artfully constructed and gripping on two occasions. I have read it through at a single sitting, unable to break away from its spell. Somewhere beyond the midpoint of the story, Dr. Frankl introduced his own philosophy of logotherapy. He introduces it is so gently into the continuing narrative that only after finishing the book does the reader realize that he is in an essay of profound depth and not just one more brutal tale of concentration camps. From this biographical fragment, the reader learns much. Learns much. He learns what a human being does when he suddenly realizes he had nothing to lose except his so ridiculously naked life. Frankl's description of the mixed flow of emotion and apathy is arresting. First, to the rescue comes a cold detached curiosity concerning one's fate. Swiftly to come strategies to preserve the remnants of one's life, though the chances of surviving are slight. Hunger, humiliation, fear, and deep anger at injustice render it tolerable by closely guarded images of beloved persons, by religion, by a grim sense of humor, and even by glimpses of the healing beauties of nature, a tree or a sunset. But these moments of comfort do not establish the will to live unless they help the prisoner make larger sense out of his apparently senseless suffering. It is here that we encounter the central theme of existentialism. To live is to suffer, to survive is to find meaning in the suffering. If their purpose in life at all, there must be a purpose in suffering and dying. Yeah, that's the good point. I never think about it. Like all people saying about meaning of life, but it is also should be meaning of suffering and dying. Yeah, interesting. So, but no man can tell another what this purpose is. Each must find out for himself and must accept the responsibility that his answer prescribes. If he succeeds, he will continue to grow in spite of all indignities. Frankl is fond of quoting Nietzsche: "He who has a why to live can bear with almost and how." Interesting. He who has a why to live can bear with almost any how. Yeah, it's mean if you have meaning, you can overcome, solve any problem. You will find out how to do that. Yeah, it's another good quote. In general, I think it's makes sense to have meaning in life, and because if you have meaning of life, you can understand why you're suffering, like for what, what's your goal. So, in the concentration camp, every circumstance conspires to make the prisoner lose his hold. All the familiar goals in life snatched away. What alone remains is the last of human freedoms: the ability to choose one's attitude in a given set of circumstances. This ultimate freedom, recognized by the ancient Stoics as well as by modern existentialists, takes on a vivid significance in Frankel's story. The prisoners were only average men, but some, at least by choosing to be worthy of their suffering, proved man's capacity to rise above his outward fate. As a psychotherapist, the author, of course, wants to know how men can be helped to achieve this distinctively human capacity. How can one awaken in a patient the feeling that he's responsible to life for something? However grim his circumstances may be, question mark, Frankl gives us a moving account of one collective therapeutic session he held with his fellow prisoners. As the publisher's request, Dr. Frankl has added a statement of the basic tenets of logotherapy as well as the bibliography. Up to now, most of the publications of this third Wien's school of psychotherapy, the predecessors being the Freudian and Adlerian schools, have been chiefly in German. The reader will therefore welcome Dr. Frankel's supplements to his personal narrative. Unlike many European existentialists, Frankel is neither pessimistic nor anti-religious. On the contrary, for a writer who faces fully the ubiquity of suffering and the forces of evil, he takes a surprisingly hopeful view of man's capacity to transcend his predicament. Predicament.
Predicament.
Oh my goodness, I was waiting right pronunciation. Okay, let's don't be lazy ass. Check out right pronunciation and meaning. Predicament. So, predicament. Meaning, predicament, meaning. Predicament mean a difficult, unpleasant, or embarrassing situation. Okay. What about pronunciation? Predicament. It seems the same.
Predicament.
Predicament. Yeah. Yeah, there is nothing special. Predicament. So let's back to the book. So we get that predicament. It's a difficult situation. So let's read that again. On the contrary, for a writer who faces fully the ubiquity of suffering and the forces of evil, he takes a surprisingly hopeful view of man's capacity to transcend his predicament and discover an adequate guiding truth. I recommend this little book heartily, for it is a gem of dramatic narrative focused upon the deepest of human problems. It has literary and philosophical merit and provides a compelling introduction to the most significant psychological movement of our day, Gordon W. L. Port. So, another preface. Oh my God, let's start reading chapter. It's so boring. So, part one: experiences in a concentration camp. Oh my goodness, let's start from tough. This book doesn't claim to be an account of facts and events, but of a personal experiences which millions of prisoners have suffered time and again. It is the inside story of a concentration camp told by one of its survivors. This tale is not concerned with the great horrors which have already been described often enough, though less often believed, but with a multitude of small torments. In other words, I will try to answer this question: how was the everyday life in a concentration camp reflected in the mind of the average prisoner? Oh my goodness, yeah, it's hard to imagine, but it's interesting to understand what was going on in their mind. So most of the events described here did not take place in the large and famous camps, but in the small ones where most of the real extermination took place. This story is not about the suffering and death of great heroes and martyrs. No, is it about the prominent capos, prisoners who acted as trustees, having special privileges, or well-known prisoners. It's like a snitches or what? So those, it is not so much concerned with the suffering of the mighty, but with the sacrifices and crucifixion, and the deaths of the great army unknown and unrecorded victims. It was these common prisoners who bore no distinguishing marks on their sleeves, whom the capos really despised. While these ordinary prisoners had little or nothing to eat, the capos were never hungry. In fact, many of the capos fared better in the camp than they had in their entire lives. Interesting. So often they were hardy, like even in this situation, they have a hierarchy, of the prisoners who live better. But I bet because the reason was that they were snitching to others. Often they were harder on the prisoners than we were the guards, and beat them more cruel than the SS men did. These capos, of course, were chosen only from those prisoners whose characters promised to make them suitable for such procedures, and if they didn't comply with what was expected of them, they were immediately demoted. They soon became much like SS men and the camp wardens, and maybe judged on a similar psychological basis. It is easy for the outsider to get the wrong conception of camp life, a conception mingled with sentiment and pity. Little does he know of the hard fight for existence which raged among the prisoners. This was an unrelenting struggle for daily bread and for life itself, for one's own sake or for that of a good friend. Let us take the case of a transport which was officially announced to transfer a certain number of prisoners to another camp. But it was a fairly safe guess that its final destination would be the gas chambers. A selection of sick or feeble prisoners incapable of work would be sent to one of the big central camps which were fitted with gas chambers and crematoriums. The selection process was the signal for free fight among all the prisoners of group against group. All that matters was that one's own name and that of one's friend were crossed off the list of victims, though everyone knew that for each man saved another victim had to be found. A definite number of prisoners had to go with each transport. It didn't really matter which, since each of them was nothing but a number. On their admin, on their admission to the camp, at least this was the method in Auschwitz. All their documents had been taken from them together with their other possessions. 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 Okay, each prisoner therefore had an opportunity to claim a fictitious name or profession, and for various reasons many did this. The authorities were interested only in the captives' numbers. These numbers were often tattooed on their skin and also had to be sewn to a certain spot on the trousers, jacket, or coat. Any guard who wanted to make a charge against a prisoner just glanced at his number, and how he dreaded such glances, he never asked for his name. To return to the convoy about to depart, there was neither time nor desire to consider moral or ethical issues. Every man was controlled by one thought only: to keep himself alive, for the family waiting for him at home, and to save his friends. With no hesitation, therefore, he would arrange for another prisoner, another number, to take his place in the transport. As I have already mentioned, the process of selecting capos was a negative one. Only the most brutal of the prisoners were chosen for this job, although there were some happy exceptions. But apart from the selection of capos, which was undertaken by the SS, there was a sort of self-selecting process going on the whole time among all of the prisoners. On the average, only those prisoners could keep alive who, after years of trekking from camp to camp, had lost all scruples in their fight for existence. They were prepared to use every means, honest, honest and otherwise even brutal force, theft and betrayal of their friends in order to save themselves. We who have come back, we who have net commercial break, so we who have come back by the aid of many lucky chances or miracles, whatever one may choose to call them, we know the best of us did not return. Many factual accounts about concentration camps are already on record. Here, facts will be significant only as far as they are part of a man's experiences. It is the exact nature of these experiences that the following essay will attempt to describe. For those who have been inmates in a camp, it will attempt to explain their experiences in the light of a present day knowledge. And for those who have never been inside, it may help them to comprehend and, above all, to understand the experiences of that only too small percentage of prisoners who survived and who now find life very difficult. These former prisoners often say, we dislike talking about our experiences. No explanations are needed for those who have been inside, and the others will understand neither how we felt then now nor how we feel now. So, to attempt a methodical presentation of the subject, to attempt a methodical presentation of the subject is very difficult, as psychology requires a certain scientific detachment. But does a man who makes his observations while he himself is a prisoner possesses the necessary detachment? Such detachment is granted to the outsider, but he's too far removed to make any statements of real value. Only the man inside knows his judgments not be objective. His evaluations may be out of proportion. This is inevitable, and attempts must be made to avoid any personal bias, and that is the real difficulty of a book of this kind. At times, it will be necessary to have the courage to tell of very intimate experiences. I had intended to write this book anonymously using my prison number only, but when the manuscript was completed, I saw that as anonymous publication it would lose half its value, and that I must have the courage to state my convictions openly. I therefore refrained from deleting any of the passages in spite of an intense dislike of exhibitionism. So let's make some break for the drinking water, because it's a hard book to read. So, welcome back. I shall leave it to others to distill the contents of this book into dry theories. This might become a contribution to the psychology of prison life, which was investigated after First World War, and which acquainted us with the syndrome of Barbet with sickness. We're indebted to the Second World War for enriching our knowledge of psychopathology of the masses. If I may quote a variation of the well-known phrase, and a little of a book by Le Bon. For the war gave us the war of nerves, and it gives us the concentration camp. And this story is about my experiences as an ordinary prisoner. It is important that I mention, not without pride, that I was not employed as a psychiatrist in camp or even as a doctor, except for the last few weeks. A few of my colleagues were lucky enough to be employed in poorly heated first aid post, applying bandages made of scraps of waste paper, but I was number 119, 104, and most of the time I was digging and laying tracks for railway lines. At one time, my job was dig a tunnel without help for water main or under a road. This feat didn't go unrewarded. Just before Christmas 1944, I was presented with a gift of so-called premium coupons. This was issued by the construction firm to which we were practically sold as slaves. The firm paid the camp authorities a fixed price per day per prisoner. The coupons cost the firm 50 pfennigs each day, and could be exchanged for thick cigarettes often weeks later, although they sometimes lost their validity. I became the proud owner of a token worth 12 cigarettes. But more important, the cigarettes could be exchanged for 12 soups, and 12 soups were often a very real respite from starvation. Even, at this horrible situation, you know, they had this kind of cynical coupons shit, marketing shit. So the privilege of actually smoking cigarettes was reserved for the capo, who had his assured quota of weekly coupons. Yeah, another question: why exactly it should be like you have permission just for 12 cigarettes? Where this number come from? Okay, or possibly for a prisoner who works as a foreman in a warehouse or workshop, and received a few cigarettes in exchange for doing dangerous jobs. The only exceptions to this were those who had lost the will to live and wanted to enjoy their last days. Thus, when we saw a comrade smoking his own cigarettes, we knew he had given up faith in his strength to carry on, and once lost, the will to live seldom return. When one examines the vast amount of material which has been amassed as a result of many prisoners' observations and experiences, three phases of the inmates' mental reactions to camp life become apparent. The period following his admission, the period when he is well entrenched in camp routine and the period following his release and liberation. The symptom that characterizes the first phase is shock. Under certain conditions, shock may even precede. The symptom that characterizes the first phase is shock. Under certain conditions, shock may even precede the prisoner's formal admission to the camp. I shall give it as an example the circumstances of my own admission. 1,500 persons had been traveling by train for several days and nights. There were 80 people in each coach. All had to lie on top of their luggage in the few remnants of their personal possessions. The carriage was so full that only the top parts of the windows were free to let in the grey of dawn. Everyone expected the train to head for some munitions factory in which we would be employed as forced labor. We didn't know where we were, still in Silesia or already in Poland. The engine's whistle had an uncanny sound like a cry for help sent out in commiseration for the unhappy load which it was destined to lead into perdition. Then the train shunted, obviously nearing a main station. Suddenly a cry broke from the ranks of the anxious passengers. There's a sign, Auschwitz. Everyone's heart missed a beat at that moment. Auschwitz, the very name, stood for all that was horrible: gas chambers, crematoriums, massacres. So, in other words, it was like a hell city, I guess. So slowly, almost hesitatingly, the train moved on as if it wanted to spare its passengers the dreadful realization as long as possible. Auschwitz. With a progressive dawn, the outlines of an immense camp became visible. Long stretches of several rows of barbed wire fences, watchtowers, searchlights, and long columns of ragged human figures, gray in the grayness of dawn, trekking along the straight, desolate roads toward destination we didn't know. There were isolated shouts and whistles of command. We didn't know their meaning. My imagination led me to see gallows with people dangling on them. I was horrified but this was just as well, because step by step we had to become accustomed to a terrible and immense horror. Eventually, we moved into the situation. The initial silence was interrupted by shouted commands. We were to hear those rough, shrill tones from then on, over and over again in all the camps. Their sound was almost like the last cry of a victim, and yet there was a difference. It had a rasping hoarseness, as if it came from the throat of a man who had to keep shouting like that, a man who was being murdered again and again. The carriage doors were flung open and a small detachment of prisoners stormed inside. They wore more stupid uniforms, their heads were shaved, but they looked well fed. They spoke in every possible European tongue, and all with a certain amount of humor which sounded grotesque under the circumstances. Yeah, that's what I like actually about Jewish people that they have good sense of humor even at this horrible situation. Like a droning man clutching a straw, my inborn optimism, which has often controlled my feelings even in the most in the most desperate situations, clung to this thought. These prisoners look quite well. They seem to be in good spirits and even laugh. Who knows? I might manage to share their favorable position. In psychiatry, there is a certain condition known as a delusion of reprieve. The condemned man, immediately before his execution, gets the illusion that he might be reprieved at the very last minute. Let me check. I think it's maybe reprived. Reprived. I think so. So reprieved. So reprieve, meaning an official order that stops or delay the punishment, especially by death of a prisoner. When you lucky, you're gonna get reprieve. So let's check out pronunciation.
Reprieve.
Oh, it's reprieve. It's not reprieve. Okay, we know another useful word. Usually I do some jokes when I reading, but it's hard to make jokes with this book, because it's describing tough period of time. It's describing so like touchy details, and it's just jokes just doesn't fit to this story, to this book, but it gives some moral, gives some good insights how this author, this person, overcome all these problems, and he just survived all this hell, So let's continue. We too clung to shreds of hope and believed to the last moment that it would not be so bad. Just the sight of the red cheeks and round faces of those prisoners was a great encouragement. Little did we know then that they formed a specially chosen elite who for years had been the receiving squad for the new transport as they rolled into the station day after day. They took charge of the new arrivals and their luggage, including scarce items and smuggled jewelry. Auschwitz must have been a strange spot in this Europe of the last years of the war. They must have been unique treasures of gold and silver, platinum, and diamonds, not only in the huge storehouses, but also in the hands of the SS. 1,500 captives were cooped up in a shed built to accommodate probably 200 at the most. We were cold and hungry, and there was not enough room for everyone to squat on the bare ground, let alone to lie down. One 5-ounce piece of bread was our only food in 4 days. Yet I heard the senior prisoners in charge of the shed bargain with one member of the receiving party about a tie pin made of platinum and diamonds. Most of the profits would eventually be traded for liqueur schnapps. I do not remember anymore just how many thousands of marks were needed to purchase the quantity of schnapps required for a gay evening. What? But I do know that those long term prisoners needed schnapps. Under such conditions, who could blame them for trying to dope themselves? There was another group of prisoners who got liquor supplied in almost unlimited quantities by the SS. These were the men who were employed in the gas chambers and crematoriums, and who knew very well that one day they would be relieved by a new shift of men, and that they would have to leave their enforced role of executioner and become victims themselves. Holy shit, like they was hiring another prisoners for execute another prisoners, yeah, like one prisoner executing another prisoner, yeah, and like a benefit they getting unlimited amount of alcohol. So nearly everyone in our transport lived under the illusion that he would be reprieved, that everything would yet be well. We didn't realize that the meaning behind the scene that was to follow presently. We were told to leave out our luggage in the train and to fall into two lines, women on one side, men in order to file on the other, men in the other on the other, in order to file past a senior SS officer. Surprisingly enough, I had the courage to hide my haversack under my coat. Haversack, what is it? Haversack. Haversack, haversack, haversack. So, a bag often made from strong, rough cloth with one or two straps. Okay, how it sounds like right pronunciation.
Haversack.
Haversack, okay, nothing special. Haversack, but it's just it's just a type of bag. Yeah. But we learning English as well, and we have to know everything. Yeah. So now we know haversack and how it looked like. It's kind of big one where you can put like many stuff. So, so we will not, of course, read the whole book today, but for now, it's actually interesting to read the story details, you know. So, where I stopped. Surprisingly enough, I had the courage to hide my haversack under my coat. My line filed past the officer man by man. I realized that it would be dangerous if the officer spotted my bag. He would at least knock me down. I knew that from previous experience. Instinctively, I straightened on approaching the officer so that he would not notice my heavy load. Then I was face to face with him. He was a tall man who looked slim and fit in his spotless uniform. What a contrast to us who were untied and grimy after our long journey. He had assumed an attitude of careless ease, supporting his right elbow with his left hand. His right hand was lifted, and with the forefinger of that hand, he pointed very leisure to the right or to the left. None of us had the slightest idea of the sinister meaning behind that little movement of a man's finger pointing now to the right and now to the left, but far more frequently to the left. It was my turn. Somebody whispered to me that to be sent to the right side would mean work, the way to the left being work, the way to the left being for the sick and those incapable of work who would be sent to a special camp. I just waited for things to take their course, the first of many such times to come. My haversack weighed me down a bit to the left, but I made an effort to walk upright. The SS man looked me over, appeared to hesitate, then put both his hands on my shoulders. I tried very hard to look smart, and he turned my shoulders very slowly until I faced right, and I moved over to that side. The significance of the finger game was explained to us in the evening. It was the first selection, the first verdict made on our existence or not existence. Like this SS fucking officer was like a god for them. He was deciding like who gonna leave and who is not. Fucking piece of shit. So it was the first selection, blah blah blah, for the great majority of our transport, about 90%. It meant death. Their sentence was carried out within the next few hours. 90%? Oh my goodness. Those who were sent to the left were marched from the station straight to the crematorium. This building, as I was told by someone who worked there, had the word bath written over its doors in several European languages. On entering, each prisoner was handed a piece of soap, and then, but mercifully, I do not need to describe the events which followed. Many accounts have been written about this horror. I didn't get like they getting soap and taking shower or what. On entering, each prisoner was handed a piece of soap, and then, by mercifully, I do not need to describe the events. Holy shit. We who were saved, the minority of our transport, found out of the truth. In the evening, I inquired from prisoners who had been there for some time where my colleague and friend P had been sent. Was he sent to the left side? Yes, I replied. Then you can see him there, I was told. Where? A hand pointed to the chimney a few hundred yards off, which was sending a column of flame up into the grey sky of Poland. It dissolved into a sinister cloud of smoke. That's where your friend is, floating up to heaven. Oh my goodness, his friend was killed, was the answer, but I still didn't understand until the truth was explained to me in plain words. But I'm telling things out of their turn. From a psychological point of view, we had a long way in front of us from the break of that down at the station until our first night's rest at the camp. Escorted by SS guards with loaded guns, we were made to run from the station past electrically charged by barbed wire through the camp to the cleansing station. For those of us who had passed the first selection, this was a real bath. again our illusion of reprieve found confirmation. The assessment seemed almost charming. Soon we out found out their reason. They were nice to us as long as they saw watches on our wrists and could persuade us in well-meaning tones to hand them over. Would we not have to hand over all our possessions anyway? And why should not that relatively nice person have the watch? Maybe one day he would do one a good turn. We waited in a shed which seemed to be the anteroom to disinfecting chambers. A salesman appeared and spread out blankets into which we had thrown all our possessions, all our watches and jewelry. Yeah, they was ripping them off. There were still naive prisoners among us who asked to the amusement of the more seasoned ones who were there as helpers if they could not keep a wedding ring, a medal, or a good luck piece. No one could yet grasp the fact that everything would be taken away. I tried to take one of the old prisoners into my confidence. Approaching him furtively, I pointed to the roll of paper in the inner pocket of my coat and said, Look, is the manuscript of a scientific book. I know what you will say, that I should be grateful to escape with my life, that should be all I can expect of fate. But I cannot help myself. I must keep this manuscript at all costs. It contains my life's work. Do you understand? Yes, he was beginning to understand. A grin spread slowly over his face. First pitches, then more amused, mocking, insulting, until he bluffed one word at me in answer to my question, a word that was ever present in the vocabulary of the camp inmates: shit. At that moment, I saw the plain truth and did what marked the culminating point of the first phase of my psychological reaction. I struck out my whole former life. Yeah, I think for today it's enough, and it's really interesting story, and I guess I will continue to read. If you like this, you can like this video and say your own opinion about this story in comments below. Thanks. Goodbye.